Hey World Civilization, part 3 of 3 here with Latin American revolutions. And if you think we're going through this quickly, you're right. Right now we're about to cover a continent that is extremely large, yet we're going to cover it in one video, sadly. But let's go ahead and get started. And we're going to start with Spanish South America. So Spanish South America is basically everything in South America except Brazil and a few other smaller nations. So we're going to start with the wars for independence in South America. And the most important person that you need to know from this section is Simón Bolívar. In 1810, after Napoleon had occupied Spain, Simón Bolívar took the opportunity to organize an uprising that established a republic in what is now Venezuela. Basically, he rose up in the capital city of Caracas and led this revolution. Bolivar was heavily influenced by Enlightenment ideas that were coming out of France. He himself was a Creole, meaning he was a white born in the Americas. He faced many challenges, though, in Venezuela. He was, for a time, sent into exile after a war there. I think twice he was sent into exile to Haiti. But ultimately, he's able to cement control, gain control of Venezuela, and has set up a republic with himself at the head. And that's where he gets this idea of breaking the ties to Spain throughout all of South America. And so he begins to do this by marching his army into the country of Colombia, across the Alps to the west. Well, the Alps run up into them. And then he marches into Ecuador, and then Peru, and Bolivia, of course named for him, pushing the Spanish out of the region. And he is very successful in these wars. We're not going to go into the details of them, but he does face a lot of opposition, but he becomes known as the liberator, as the person who liberates or frees these regions from Spanish control. When he gets to Bolivia, he meets another great revolutionary leader, José de San Martín. And you see in this picture here, these two meeting with each other, and they're going to discuss the future of the country of Peru upon its freedom. Like Bolivar, José de San Martín leads a revolution that helped Argentina gain independence from Spain. After marching into Chile and Peru, San Martín, who is coming basically from the south while Bolivar is coming from the north, and you can take a look at your map that you have on your homework to see this, they meet basically in the middle. And San Martín, with his troops exhausted, turns command over to Bolivar, who is the strongest general in the region. And so 1822, Bolivar takes over all these forces, and by 1824, the South American Wars for Independence are over. Basically, the Spanish are pushed completely out of South America. Bolivar had united the lands he had liberated into one country. So the countries that are the present-day countries of Colombia, Ecuador, and Venezuela were one country under his rule called Gran Colombia. But eventually this is going to split into different countries, and we'll cover that at the very end of this video, why that happens. Panama was part of Colombia at the time, so that is another country that comes later on. South America also faces many struggles for power over the next decades, and they face several destructive civil wars. And again, we'll talk about why this is in a little bit. But just kind of wrap up, these wars for independence, they kick Spain out, but it's not the end of struggle in South America. All right, now we're going to hit Brazil. We're going to talk about this. And Brazil is a little different because it is not controlled by the Spanish, but instead by the Portuguese. So Brazil gained their independence very different, in a different way than the rest of Latin America. After the invasion of Napoleon in 1808 into Portugal and Spain, if you remember that from our previous videos, the Portuguese royal family did not stay in Spain, but instead they fled. They left completely. They escaped. And they went to Brazil, which was the most important Portuguese colony, where a lot of their gross domestic product came from. And so the Portuguese royal family there with King John, I think was his name, they ruled from there from 1808 all the way until 1821. And when the king leaves, he leaves his son in Portugal, or excuse me, in Brazil, Dom Pedro. And that's who you see pictured to the right. So Dom Pedro is in charge of Brazil as a colony of Portugal when the Portuguese royal family leaves. But in 1822, Dom Pedro declares Brazil to be an independent constitutional monarchy. So they write a constitution, he has to answer to it, but he himself is king or emperor. Dom Pedro angers some of the local elites in Brazil, mainly because he has some opposition, or he's not necessarily, he doesn't like slavery. He's an abolitionist. And so he is actually forced shortly after he takes control to abdicate the throne and give it up to his son. And so his son takes over, and he will rule, Dom Pedro II, until 1889. So for quite some time. But again, Brazilian independence comes a little bit in a different way, a little bit easier, and they declare independence in 1822. Now, if you think back to our video goals that we had, one of the questions was, what were some of the challenges that faced Latin American countries following independence? And so these are those challenges they faced. Number one, these countries had a lot of trouble establishing stable governments. With strong leaders, military leaders helping them gain independence, when those military leaders died or were removed or there was some uprising, that power vacuum was filled by a lot of different people who then struggled for power. These leaders clash, and when they take over, they even clash with people who wanted representative governments, where people would elect their leaders. So that is something that's going to kind of haunt Latin America for quite some time after independence. Also, as we mentioned with Gran Colombia and the United Provinces of Central America, countries fought within their countries over regional differences, and that eventually led to countries splitting up. Even the United Provinces of the Rio de la Plata, which eventually splits up into Argentina and Chile and Bolivia, they're going to have these same issues. European nations also cause some problems for Latin America because they're occasionally going to intervene in Latin American affairs. President Monroe of the United States issued something called the Monroe Doctrine to try and keep European countries from messing with Latin America, but they still do so, especially the British, who built a huge empire in the 1800s. Sometimes it's what we might see as positive ways. Britain used their navy to cut off the slave trade to Brazil, but occasionally it was for economic interests. Slavery continues to be a problem in these independent Latin American countries, as do women's rights, discrimination toward Native Americans or to mixed-race peoples, and then also there are going to be a lot of conflicts between natives and the leadership, the Creole leadership of these countries. And so Latin America is still going to be kind of in a delicate time period. And we're going to see how that affects them later on when we study the Industrial Revolution. So here are the video goals that we had for all three of these videos. Make sure that you can identify these people, that you can define the vocabulary, and that you can answer the 3 video goals questions that are answered across these videos. Hopefully I provided a fairly comprehensive understanding of all this. I know it was a lot in a little amount of time, but that's it. That's the end. Y'all have a wonderful night.